It's June 23rd, 2025. Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, also bettingangle.us. It's the day after Game 7 of the 2025 NBA Finals. OKC, they're the champions, folks. Let's talk about it. Let's also talk about some bets for next season that I think are appropriate. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, you had a stunning moment. It was stunning. It didn't even work out for the Thunder. It was stunning in that Game 7 where there was a stretch where TJ McConnell, a very fast guard with an explosive first step and excellent change of direction, a lot of moves around the basket. He scored 4 baskets in a row for the Pacers, right? 8 points in a row. And the reason it was stunning was that the defense that OKC threw at the Thunder involved having a that OKC threw at the Pacers involved having a 7'1" guy, Chet Holmgren, following McConnell around the court. Right, folks? I think it goes without saying that there are very few teams in the National Basketball Association who have a guy who's at least 7'1", who could follow a quick darting guard around the court like Chet Holmgren did. And let me point out the stunner. It's the fact that while he was chasing McConnell around the court, and McConnell made some incredible layups, just understand that nobody else on Indy could get open to hit a jumper. Nobody else on Indy. This is with the 7'1" guy chasing McConnell. Nobody else on Indy could score. Right, folks? That's the level of defense that OKC brings to the table. Now understand, they're the second youngest team in NBA history to win a title. So you're talking about a young team. Holmgren is not going to lose, absent some catastrophic injury. His dexterity, his coordination, right? I believe these guys are only going to get better. Right? So understand, you have one of the youngest teams in the league. They have established a culture of elite defense that gives them flexibility to do things other teams outside of San Antonio simply can't do. Right? And understand the level of scorers. Shea has led the league in points per game. Understand Jalen Williams, who is much better than advertised. I believe this is a alpha who's deliberately playing beta. Dropped 40 in a game in these finals. So the best part for our purposes here, because we're just gamblers trying to make a profit, is the fact that in an earlier generation, when a team like this showed up, right, we call them the Big Three because 2 of the 3 earned their stripes on other teams, right? Let's go back to the Heatles era. Chris Bosh, he was a Raptor. LeBron James, he was a Cavalier. They joined up with D. Wade, and they were the Big Three. You weren't going to get great odds on them. Everyone knew these guys were all-stars before they even banded together. Right? D. Wade actually won an NBA Finals before joining up with the other two guys. Now, what if I told you that this OKC team that has no interesting nickname, right? They're just known as the OKC Thunder, right? We hear about, Shea winning the MVP, right? I believe that part of that is Joker fatigue. Well, let me just say, you have a big three that no one's calling the big three, right? It's Shea. He is one of the best players in the league. It's Chet, and it's Jalen Williams, right? Chet, very highly thought of out of high school. I believe Chet was picked first or second in the NBA draft. Right now, I go to a sports bar from time to time to watch games. And I was talking with an avid sports fan at the sports bar. And both of us were talking about how when we saw OKC and we saw the culture at their games, right? The crowd, everyone's wearing blue. I know everyone was wearing gold in Indy, but in OKC it feels different, right? It almost feels like you're watching an episode of The Tulsa King, right? That Sly Stallone show on Paramount Plus. Great show, by the way. It feels like a small town, right? I believe because the Thunder don't play in New York, Philly, Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, they're overlooked. That's great in my book. More beer for us. Folks, this is a dominant team. This is that rare finals team that has a chance at a run. We don't know some of the guys because they're homegrown. I know Shea had a cup of coffee with the Clippers, right? But understand, he was a young guy when he started playing for OKC. Chet and Jalen, they're really guys who came of age as OKC Thunder, right? We view this team as, a one-man show, and I know that's not what Shea wants, right? It's Shea who's making sure teammates are in his advertisements, right? Shea has a very high EQ. Let me just say, folks, I know Durant is now a Houston Rocket. If everyone stays healthy, I don't see the team in the Western Conference who's going to be able to compete with OKC next year. Right? I just don't. Now, this can change. We saw that in Game 7. Right? The Pacers looked like they were well positioned for next year. And then it looked to me, and I haven't heard the medical report, I did hear some comments from his father. It looks to me that Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles has snapped. If it snapped, there's a chance he misses all of next year. Boston's facing the same problem with Jason Tatum. Right? Indy has some hard decisions to make. 30-year-old center Miles Turner, 30 or so. Do I sign him to big money if my team realistically has no shot of winning the championship? Without Tyrese Halliburton, let's be clear on who he is. He led the league in assists. Not this season, but last season. And I think we're finding out, whatever Halliburton's stats, he's actually a better player than that, because he's one of the premier closers in the postseason. Right? Let me point out, too, he was having a game, wasn't he? In the first half of the first quarter, right? He was hitting threes. In the biggest game of the year, Tyrese Halliburton was Tyrese Halliburton. Then, of course, the injury happened. But let me make another point. I was looking at the stats live as the game was taking place, right? Even when Indy had the lead and Tyrese was on the court, they were doing so because of threes. It wasn't like the team could even match OKC during that run in field goal percentage. In other words, as you're watching Tyrese Halliburton hit threes and Indy off to a fast start in the game, parts of their offense was being snuffed out. Right? Understand, defense at times is a silent killer. So you saw it clearly in the third quarter. Right? You saw TJ McConnell, he's keeping his team in it. And then you looked around and you thought, what's happening with these other guys? Then they would throw the ball to some guy, Pascal Siakam, and you noticed that defenders were on him. Right, folks? You know, defense like that can't be taught. You're not going to see a Knick team, I don't care who the coach is, with Cat and with Brunson, ever play that level of defense. Right? OKC threw down the defensive gauntlet in the third quarter. As you were watching the game, you know, you understood this might not pop out to many people because the highlights are really flooded with, you know, guys taking shots, guys making great passes. That's what we're conditioned to look for. Not a guy standing outside trying to pass the ball and he can't even pass the ball because he's seeing defenders eyeing the passing lanes. He's seen Alex Caruso jump in a passing lane to steal a ball already. Right? So let's just say the heart of Indiana's offense was cut out. So TJ McConnell started doing it on his own. And OKC's D is so deep, they had a 7'1" guy on him. Now McConnell, to his credit, got the better of Chet Holmgren. Right? But folks, I'm a Knick fan. We couldn't, on our best day, dream of having Robinson or Cat stick TJ McConnell one-on-one, while also maintaining the defensive integrity of the rest of our defense. Right? OKC did in a game 7, and they pulled it off. Right? The third quarter is the quarter in this game. It's a mismatch. Understand, to get to this point where a team is this sold on defense is rare. Right? Jordan, back in the day of the Bulls, understand, the Bulls were great defensively. Right? Jordan has a great quote where he says, offense comes and goes, but you should be able to play great defense every night. Right, folks? All I can say is that's the culture right now at Oklahoma City. And they have the personnel to pull it off for years. right? Shea's not going to forget how to score. I'm telling you, Jalen Williams probably has the best first step on that team. And I believe if he wanted, and this is a guy who already is averaging over 20 points a game, could lift his scoring percentage 3 or 4 points per game. Right? Chet Holmgren, who was injured for part of the year. Look at the days missed for Chet Holmgren. And then realize that the team went through the regular season with 68 wins. Right? 68. Right? They have Dagenal. Understand, his coaching style, seems to be player friendly. Right? He seems to be a low-key guy who doesn't need the spotlight. This isn't a Paul Westhead, Magic Johnson situation where Westhead was a successful pro coach, but the star player, Magic, didn't like the offense and wanted a Showtime type of offense and ended up axing Westhead. Right here you have a coach who his style dovetails with the players. And of course, you have some defensive wizards on the team. Alex Caruso should never be allowed to put on any other uniform. Right? Lou Dort is a 3-and-D guy, and understand he's one of the better defenders in the league. Right? So, let's talk about next year. Right? This year's in the books. People can debate it. At the bar where I watched the game, there was conversation about how if Tyrese Halliburton was healthy, this would have been Indies and stuff like that. Okay. Folks will make those arguments till the cows come home. As you do, I just want you to revisit the sequence where for a prolonged period of time, OKC was able to throw a 7-foot 1-inch guy on quick, crafty, change of direction TJ McConnell. Right, folks? That's stunning. You have some great defenders in the league. Rudy Gobert, for example, who would not be able to stick a slick point guard. Right? That's not their game. Chet Holmgren is that rare 7-1 guy who can. Right? And let's just say, developmentally, OKC is much more advanced than the San Antonio Spurs with Wemby. Right? I'll agree. Wemby's a great defender. I'll agree. Wemby, spectacular coordination. Right? But understand, OKC made the playoffs last year. Right? OKC, spectacular road record this year. Right? It's going to take San Antonio a while to develop the culture that OKC has right now. And understand, with OKC, everyone's bought in. So, the Western Conference, 2026. Let me also point out, too, I know some people are going to be outraged. They're going to say, how could you be thinking futures so early? The first day. It hasn't even been 24 hours. Let me just say, number one, the best time to invest is when you've just won money. Right? I just got some money. I can put it to work. Sure. If I put it to work on this bet, that money's tied up for a year. Right? I'll take that risk since the odds I'm being offered compensate me for that risk. OKC to win the Western Conference. These odds are what's posted right now on bovada.lv. Right, folks? They're a plus 140. You're telling me I don't even have to worry about Cleveland or the Celtics, right? In other words, OKC wins the Western Conference, I'm good, right? I'm good. I can then grab my popcorn, watch the NBA Finals, see them against a rough Cleveland team, let's say, and just say, man, I'm just glad that bet ended and my money cashed. I don't even have to worry about what's going on in that NBA Finals, right? I think that's a layup. Right now, I'll agree. Houston, which gave up a lot defensively, right? Dylan Brooks, I'm not saying he's the friendliest basketball player I've come across. He doesn't fill the stat sheet like some other players, like Kevin Durant. But Dylan Brooks is one of these leaders in the locker room. He's one of these lightning rod players, right? He's the guy who has already made an all defensive team and who can yell at young guys, and Houston's a young team, to up their defensive game because, of course, they see him upping his defensive game. He's part of the Kevin Durant trade, right? Jalen Green, I'll agree. Jalen Green hasn't improved as much as his promise suggested, right? If you look at Jalen Green, you'll find out when he was in the G League Ignite or something like that, they paid him $500,000. He was that much of a prodigy coming out of the Fresno area, right? He was on some national teams, some under, 16-year-old teams and stuff like that. Now, I'll agree, he didn't make the jump. If you believe a guy's going to be a superstar, that guy typically makes a bit of a jump relatively early in his career. Jalen Green's been in the league now, at least 3 seasons, right? He's a very good player. He's not a spectacular player. So they, of course, shipped Jalen Green. They shipped Dylan Brooks. They shipped 5 second-round picks to get Kevin Durant. Let me say this about Durant, right? Like Cat, like Brunson, Durant is always going to be defensively challenged for at least one of the 4 quarters, right? He's not defensively blessed. This is a guy who's 37 years old. This is the offensive specialist, right? We'll find out together how that wears on Houston, because Houston last year really was a defensively blessed team. Right now they're bringing in an offensive specialist. You and I know Durant, who played in an NBA Finals as an Oklahoma City Thunder, right? You and I know he wouldn't fit in with these Thunder, right? Because this Thunder team, Jalen Williams and SGA, they both play defense, right? The fact that you can put up 20 plus points per game doesn't give you the get out of the defensive responsibility card, right? We'll see how he fits in with Houston. Understand, Houston's one of the few teams, and I mean few, in the Western Conference who, to me, have an outside shot of beating OKC for the Western Conference title. You're getting Houston right now at a plus 400. Right now, forgive me, I know Luka made the NBA Finals last year. I don't take the Lakers seriously, right? New ownership, that leads to uncertainty, right? LeBron last year, I'm concerned, right? I haven't seen a guy on a superstar, on a team that wins 50 games, have a negative plus minus for the season. I know there's some Phoenix Sun guys who didn't have a positive plus minus who are damn good players. But understand, the Suns stunk last year. They weren't a 50-win team, right? We all understand that a plus minus, a positive plus minus, is hard to come by. It's hard to come by on a really bad team. Although Michael Jordan somehow, even as a wizard, found a way to have a positive plus minus. I know LeBron has great numbers. I believe at this stage he's an older player with numbers that overstate his value. Right? On plus minus, just understand, he was a negative this last season. Right? I don't think he meshes with Luka. If the team is serious about winning, I think they're going to have to break those two up, and they're going to have to work with LeBron to find a new spot for him. And they're going to have to bring in some young, hungry guy who's going to be able to generate a high plus minus. Right? Understand, Luka didn't even know his way around LA. As a Laker, he had a higher plus minus than LeBron James. Right? Let me also say, too, diplomatically, the Golden State Warriors don't have players like Bronny James. Right? If you're a team that wants to win a title, right, understand, it's unlikely Bronny James is going to have a roster spot. So now that the Lakers have new ownership, we'll see how they work it, because there's a bit of a fan relations problem right now with Los Angeles. Is new ownership going to come in, mistreat a Laker who delivered your last title, right? Mistreat one of the best ever to play in the NBA, right? By pushing him out the door and nudging Bronny out the door. But if you don't do that, how are you going to compete? And I'm serious about this. You tell me your thoughts in the comment section of this video. How are you going to compete with OKC? Right, folks? 68 wins is what OKC just threw down. 68. Let me also make another point, too. Luka has some defensive numbers, but we all know Luka is defensively challenged. Right? The Lakers have to make a decision. Which direction do they go? I thought Dallas, the year Luka and Kyrie made the NBA Finals, did a great thing by bringing in tough-nosed defensive guys to surround those guys with. Right? LA has to decide if that's the path they're going to pursue, or whether they're going to be a fan-friendly team with a lot of scoring specialists, a lot of known players who can't play the kind of lockdown defense that just got OKC an NBA title. So to sum up here, OKC is a plus 225 to win the whole thing. I'm more enamored of the plus 140 to win the Western Conference title. The sleeper team for me personally in the West are the Clippers, right? But the Clippers are an older team, right? That, hasn't been healthy together for a prolonged period of time. But I do believe James Harden is still one of those guys who by himself can win you a couple of games in a playoff series. I know that's not the public reputation. I know the public wants to focus on James Harden in closeout games. Right? You know what? To me, a win's a win. If James Harden can deliver 2 wins in an NBA playoff series, right? And Kawhi looked great this last season late, right? If James Harden can deliver 2 wins, they could be games 1 and 2 or 1 and 3. I don't care. And then we get to the game 6 or the game 7. I'm good with that. I won't rely on James Harden in those games. Right? At that stage, I should be able to rely on Kawhi Leonard and others. Right? I think the Clippers are a tough out. You're getting them, ironically, at a plus 1,400. Right? The teams that I feel probably aren't going to get it done. And let me just say, this is not a fan club site. I want to be blunt. Right? I really believe in Tyrese Halliburton. The Pacers have 2 things against them. They just lost an NBA Finals. Folks, that's almost like losing a Super Bowl. Right? You don't bounce back right away. So that's a big hit. Then, of course, Tyrese is out for most of next season, if not all of next season. That's a big hit. The casino has already dropped the Pacers to a plus 3,000. In other words, you're getting 30-1 odds on the Pacers to win it all. I think that's wasted money. Right? Pacers also have decisions to make. Maybe those decisions would have been different had they won the NBA title. But since they lost, and since wages, you're up against a salary cap, I myself am wondering which players the Pacers are going to re-sign. I think that has too much uncertainty. Let me say this too. Minnesota. Anthony Edwards is a streak shooter. Right? He's not Chris Mullin. He's not, Larry Bird. Right? And while during the regular season, he had numbers that looked like they could challenge Steph Curry. Right? Steph Curry has a history of delivering in big games, whether it's the Olympic gold medal game, whether it's game 4 of Golden State's finals against the Boston Celtics. Right? I haven't seen that with Anthony Edwards. We were talking too about how Edwards reminded a lot of people about Michael Jordan. Right? Let's remember, Jordan one year is Defensive Player of the Year. Right? While he's winning a scoring title. Jordan's a different level than Anthony Edwards. I don't think Edwards can carry the T-Wolves. I'll say this, too. Rudy Gobert, if it's not in the low post, Rudy really can't hang. And he's a little bit of an offensive liability, isn't he? So the market's punishing the T-Wolves. They're down at a plus 1,600. They're going to have to add some players for me to think they have even an outside shot of beating a team like OKC. Right? Those are my thoughts, and I know they did, let's say they match up with OKC for whatever reason better than a lot of teams do. Right? But I'm just not sure if the pieces are in place with the Timberwolves. I was surprised at how John Randall looked so good at times in the playoffs and then was completely taken out of the game. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Clippers to win the whole thing, plus 2,800. Clippers to win the West, plus 1,400. I don't see the team that can beat OKC in the West. The primary linchpin bet I'm going with is OKC plus 140. Right, but let's watch this off season. Kevin Durant's already moved. Maybe some of these teams are going to surprise us. Maybe Joker somehow ends up in LA. That would be a game changer. Let's see what happens. Golden State needs a big. Let me also say, too, I'm one of those guys who questions this NBA draft. Right? I've heard that Flag has looked great in playing against pros and stuff like that. Right? I look at him, he looks a little stiff to me. Right? I don't see the player. Some of the guys in the draft lost several inches when they were measured. Right? This looks like a soft draft class to me. But it's June. We'll see how I feel in October after I see these guys in some preseason and early games. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. If there's a betting angle you think needs to be explored, if you believe the Knicks are going to explode, if you believe some other team is going to explode, if you believe Minnesota is just one piece away, if you believe LeBron and Luka are going to blend seamlessly this year and that the plus minus numbers are going to percolate, tell us about all that in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.